Today. My name is Jane Marriott, I'm the UK High Commissioner, and this is where I would like to be on a Saturday morning with all of you. For decades, Pakistan's human rights defenders have acted to improve the situation of their fellow human beings. They've fought hard for socio-economic inequality and pushed for the right for dignity and inclusion. One of the great among them was, of course, the inspirational Asma Jahangir, in whose name we congregate today. Those of you in the room today follow bravely in her footsteps. Your perseverance and solidarity have led to great success, often in the face of terrible danger. As the conference theme notes, this is the year of elections, and an estimated 4 billion people globally will head to the polls in at least 64 different countries. This is around 50% of the world's population, more voters than ever in history. Almost every country in South Asia has either conducted elections or is heading to the polls this year. And like the rest of the world, this region's democracy is fragile. Every democracy, of course, needs to ever evolve and ever contest. We must never take democracy for granted. We must never be complacent. The UK is one of the oldest established democracies in the world, and yet there are still constant steps that we need to take. We particularly struggle to combat disinformation, which is a growing problem as artificial intelligence advances. And we also still have significant work to do to increase voter participation from young people and underprivileged groups. In the last few months, we've seen many people across the world protesting against the democratic rollback, on the streets, online, and through the very act of voting. This is a sign that people are willing to use their voice to demand their rights. The right to vote is, of course, the most fundamental tenet of democracy, as the will of the people is the basis for the authority of the government. And here in Pakistan, it was heartening to see people turn out in number to vote in February. As UK Foreign Secretary Lord David Cameron said in his statement, this was despite serious concerns about the fairness and lack of inclusivity of the elections. Not all parties were formally permitted to contest the elections, and legal processes were used to prevent some political leaders from participation and to prevent the use of recognisable party symbols. Restrictions were imposed, as we know, on internet access on polling day, and social media continues to be disrupted. There were significant delays in the reporting of results and claims of irregularities in the counting process. And challenges like this can undermine democracy. But therefore, this conference is more important than ever, because this conference this weekend, for example, has got a range of sessions on improving accessibility in polls, including for the most marginalised groups, such as the transgender persons and the Ahmadi community. We must work hard together as one, Pakistan's government, its civil society, and its friends, like those of us in the international community, to nurture the seeds of an open society and vibrant democracy in Pakistan. Why? Because open societies are more inclusive. Open societies promote development. On average, open societies have higher levels of growth, higher levels of accountability and justice, lower levels of corruption, more ambitious climate policies, and are less prone to conflict and stability. The new government has a responsibility to the people it serves and to represent the interests of all Pakistani citizens and communities with equity and justice. And I'm absolutely delighted to see the high representation today from the government committed to the cause today of human rights, because there is clearly an opportunity now to overcome the politics of division with a sincere commitment to human rights and democracy. Human rights and democracy is easier to deliver, of course, if basic rights are in place. And we know that with poverty, inflation and unemployment, Pakistan's new government is grasping a serious set of severe economic challenges. This affects millions of people's rights to health, to food and to an adequate standard of living. The UK too is also suffering from a cost of living crisis, and I know how difficult it is to see people making a painful choice between paying their energy bills or putting food on the table. And that's why economic reforms like energy tariffs, austerity and the removal of subsidies need to come with adequate protection for the vulnerable through existing progressive tariff structures. But it's also why these economic reforms are so crucial and why I'm so glad to see the new government looking to embrace the difficult decisions that it needs to take. Because as long as Pakistan's economy remains constrained, it will be the poorest and the most marginalised who will continue to suffer the most. This new government in Pakistan has a unique opportunity to put human rights at the forefront of all reforms, ensuring that equity is underscored as it develops solutions to pressing social, civil, climate, economic and political challenges. Coming back to human rights, the UK, of course, believes, like I hope we all do in this room today, that equal rights for women and religious minorities are at the centre of human rights commitments. In this last year, it was heart-wrenching to see incidents of lynching, attempts at vigilante violence and targeted killings in the name of a religion that does not support such things. The hope lies, however, in law enforcement's response, stopping mob violence and rescuing accused individuals. Hope lies in the leadership that we saw at the federal and provincial level who are supporting minorities. Hope lies with those Muslim neighbours who showed solidarity with the affected minority communities. Pakistan's bright future will be ensured by this good, tolerant majority. But the state must act against the chaos-creating minority who weaponise religion to target the weak and vulnerable. Promoting a culture of coexistence is not just necessary to uphold freedom of religion of belief, it's also critical to ensure gender equality. And while Pakistan has very good laws and legislation to protect the rights of women, the implementation of these laws needs to be more consistent. Unless they are, it will weaponise the state's response to gender-based violence and discrimination. Patriarchal norms, therefore, need to be shunned at all levels and not reinforced. We can't talk, of course, about human rights without mentioning freedom of expression. This is a fundamental right that must be upheld in democratic societies, but there is a worrying trend globally of governments limiting freedom of speech, targeting journalists, protesters, and other persons they consider troublesome. Democracies require tolerance. They do not function properly without accountability and transparency. Fair criticism of any state should be allowed and encouraged in an open society, because it's our ability to hear our critics and to introspect, to think about what they are saying, that makes us improve at an individual level, at an institutional level, and at a societal level. And it's unfortunate to see every day around the world that the list of tactics to silence those we disagree with keeps expanding. In February this year, UK parliamentarians have debated instances where debate in Pakistan appears to have been silenced. This includes concerns about enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings, particularly in KP and Baluchistan. And therefore, I very much welcome the government of Pakistan's recent announcement to reconstitute the Cabinet Committee on Missing Persons and to find a political solution to this long-standing issue. While there are claims that some missing persons are militant separatists or criminals who have gone into hiding or fled abroad, there are still, sadly, many people who are unaccounted for. The families of those who have disappeared are victims too, and should be treated with compassion, dignity and respect, because they have the right to truth and justice. Impartial and thorough investigation is crucial, and it requires humility and openness, and I hope Pakistan will also agree to host the UN Working Group on Enforced Disappearances fact-finding mission. It's also worrying to see short-term disappearances and arbitrary detention of journalists without due lawful processes. Journalists should be free to work in a safe environment without fear of violence, abuse, intimidation, discrimination or interference. And I hope that the measures outlined in Pakistan's Journalist Protection Act can be implemented to protect journalists when they face serious threat of harm. Citizens too have a right to digital free speech, and since February the 17th, access to X or Twitter has been restricted across Pakistan. Whatever criticisms one may have of social media, and there are many legitimate criticisms of social media out there, we simply cannot ignore it as a medium. We must find a way to ensure that people are free to express their views as long as they are not causing harm. So I urge the government of Pakistan to restore access to X and to uphold the right to freedom of expression. And it's also important that any law passed to regulate the online space is done carefully and follows due consideration and consultation with civil society. Here in Pakistan, the UK is contributing to the elimination of online hate speech and disinformation against religious minorities and women. With our partners in UNDP, we are helping the government of Pakistan to build the capacity of information officers and journalists to protect the most vulnerable from online harm. And, shameless plug, I hope that you can join tomorrow's expert panel session at 3:30 in the Shalimar Hall on tackling hate speech and disinformation. I'll finish by coming back to the reason why we're here, Asma Jahangir. I read a tribute from when she passed away that said she left a legacy of both courage and hope. Hope is essential in confronting intersecting crises of climate change, economic inequality, and threats to democratic values. Hope points towards the openness that is required for change and to achieve our democratic ideals. This conference, filled with all of you today, is the perfect platform to cultivate hope. You are all optimists, you're all hopeful. The world is a difficult place, it's difficult to deliver change, which is why hope is the strongest emotion, that together we can achieve the change and support Pakistan to be the great country that it is. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.